Welcome everyone to this live marketplace best practices session, how to create a winning marketplace performance management strategy. I'm your announcer, Tom Gatos, CMO of McFadyen Digital. This session is scheduled for a 45-minute total runtime, including a Q&A at the end. Please enter any questions into the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. The recording of this session will be provided to all registrants afterwards. I'll now turn it over to your host, Lee Reister.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome everybody. Today's session is the latest in a series of best practices webinars that McFadyen Digital has been holding. This is built off of the book that we released last year, Marketplace Best Practices, and which is basically a play-by-play template for how to plan, build, and operate a marketplace. If you have interest in this book, we'd love to send you a copy, or we could give you a download key for your Kindle, if that's your preferred medium. If so, just shoot me an email and we'll get one right out to you. So with that said, let me mention just briefly, if you don't know who McFadyen Digital is, we are a full service marketplace provider of services from strategy development through implementation, seller recruiting and onboarding, and you can see the different practice areas that we have, as well as ongoing performance management, which is our topic for today. Let me, without further ado, introduce our guests. First, joining me from McFadyen is my colleague, Laura Landau. Laura is a client success manager, and she works with our clients around the topic of performance management, helping to ensure that once they go live, they're actually achieving the objectives that they set out to achieve. So she's going to be supporting me today and sharing some information with you as well. Our special guest, first, Tyler Ellison. Tyler is the CEO of ChemDirect. Tyler, if I could ask you, perhaps you could introduce yourself and a little bit about your company.
Sure. Thanks, Lee, and thanks for having me. Tyler Ellison. Hello, everyone. My background is a combination of technology, logistics, and the chemical industry. ChemDirect is a point, click, and buy B2B marketplace purposed for the chemical industry, very much driving a B2C experience in a B2B market, very much focused on customer fulfillment time. So our average order to fulfillment is 3.5 days, and we continue to grow quickly. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Tyler. And next, let me introduce Mark Brohan. Mark is the VP B2B and Market Research Development at Digital Commerce 360. Mark, like myself, is a veteran of the commerce and marketplace industry and will bring us a lot of wealth of information today. And Mark, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. We appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about one of the hottest trends in e-commerce today on the business side, which is marketplaces. We're a publishing company, and we're a journalistic research organization that does solely nothing but e-commerce. We cut our teeth way back in the day in 1998 when we launched Internet Retailer Magazine. So I have been around since the start of both the B2C side and the B2B side. I go back far enough where I remember the dot-com crash, and I remember when marketplaces were a much talked about, great idea 2 decades before their time, and a lot of successful crash and burn stories. So it'll be fun today kind of telling you what was what in the context of what is coming in now. But in the end, we're a bunch of curious reporters who do nothing but live, eat, and breathe and cover e-commerce. We want to benchmark the market and tell people what it means to them. That's what we do, day in, day out.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So I thought it would be good to just kind of level set. Maybe you've not heard the term explicitly, marketplace performance management. It's a term we coined here at McFadyen. I personally haven't seen anybody else use this term. We also call it MPM. It's the acronym we've given it. But MPM has different components to it, as I've outlined here. First, MPM is a bit of a philosophy. What do I mean by that? It's really the concept of proactively managing your marketplace to drive profitable growth versus I like to say the build it and they will come approach to strategy, which was popularized in the movie Field of Dreams. I've seen over the years in e-commerce, oftentimes that's an approach. Hey, let's just put this up, see what kind of online revenue we can get. Well, the marketplace, it's fundamentally different. There are major differences, certainly in the business model, the revenue model, organizational model, and it needs to be thought of as a business, not a website. And so how do you manage a business, any business? Well, we think that it needs to be done with a coherent marketplace performance management strategy backed by this philosophy. Secondly, it's a process. MPM actually begins with the definition of strategic objectives and success measures. This should actually occur during your planning process when you're developing your strategic business plan for your marketplace. And then it's supported by an ongoing cadence to assess, adjust, and optimize. It's a strategic management process, as I like to say, that's required to do this. But a process by itself is just a process. And what's required is data. And so MPM also, we've created a product. You could build this yourself, I suppose. But it's the application of analytics for the benefit of the marketplace operator so that you can do the things that we talked about and ultimately increase business performance. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the session as well. But just first to restate, I'm not going to read these, but you saw them in the invite, what our objectives are today. How do you select the right key metrics? How do you quantify them? How do you get actionable insights? And then how do you operationalize that? What today is not, though, as I tried to intimate, is we're not giving you a product demo. That's not what this is today. We're not giving you a product pitch, but we will use some screenshots from our product to convey some ideas. If, however, you are interested in a demo, again, reach out to me. We'd be more than happy to arrange that with you. So with that, let's get into it. Mark, if I could, let's start out, if you don't mind, and let's set the big context of what is actually happening in the world of marketplaces. It kind of give us a state of the market, some trends, is this space growing? Is it thriving? Is it flat? Help us out there if you could.
The takeaway here is that no matter what your walk of life, no matter what type of marketplace you think you may want to explore or indeed expand, the context here is if you understand what the growth drivers are, if you understand the channel marketplaces in correlation to overall digital commerce, it sets perspective because now you know where the roadmap's going. And then from there, you funnel down and figure out what's best for you and your organization. But to show you that last year, B2B commerce was probably back to what it should have been. I mean, if you look at 2020, the pandemic held growth to the slowest growth rate in probably 6, 7, 8 years by our count, if you will. Now this year, most concluded year 2021, much more back to normal. Although last year was indeed streaky, but last year, all in B2B e-commerce sales. By that, I'm defining the sales that took place on e-commerce sites, apps, and yes, indeed, marketplaces grew by nearly 18% and totaled 1.6 trillion. Yeah, that's a T. That's a trillion. That's how big the stuff is getting here. And that growth rate is probably going to hold for the foreseeable future, even as we kind of whipsaw through, European wars and lingering pandemics. My point, though, is not only is digital commerce now mainstream, B2B marketplaces are now mainstream. So our next slide is going to kind of give you just a little more perspective on where we're going with all of this. So last year, B2B marketplaces total about $56 billion. And, compared to 1.6 trillion, is that a lot? Well, once again, context, because if you look at what the fastest growing channel across the board, for digital commerce, which by our definition includes EDI, it includes e-commerce sites and apps and marketplaces, it includes e-procurement. So my point is, B2B commerce is multiple touch points with the broad name digital commerce. But if you look at all of those channels separately, one by one, the one that stands out the most because it's the fastest growing was marketplaces. And 56 billion on that context, 2/3 of that number is probably Amazon Business, which did about 20 odd billion last year. They're going to double that in 3 to 5 years, depending upon which analyst or which Wall Street firm you look at and what their projections are. But the thing is, this section, this channel is now being able to define. You can kind of take a look at what the commercial guys are doing. eBay, Alibaba, Amazon, if you will. You can look at some of the valuations from a lot of the investor money pouring billions into this, and there's more public companies coming online. So my point is that 56 billion is a pretty good number because you can ground that in a lot of good data, from marketplaces that trade publicly, or you can see what what their financials look like. So my takeaway here is that even though it's less than 1% of total sales for B2B commerce, in comparison, 2 years ago, that was probably 0.001. So the fact that one channel in just the last 24 months can come out of nowhere and take that market share is one indicator that shows you just how fast this thing is growing. So next slide, please. Some more context here, which is companies, organizations are now using B2B marketplaces. And why are they doing it? Well, you guys got the memo because the pandemic, of course, accelerated all aspects of digital commerce. The branches are shut down. You couldn't do traditional types of sales, if you will. Everything, of course, more digital. Old news. But the takeaway here is that a lot of organizations that never thought about something called a marketplace before suddenly globbed onto wondering, what is all these? How does all this work for me? Because this was a brand new way that was going to allow them to source products or sell products. And that set off this bonanza of startups or accelerations across a number of broadline B2B marketplaces. One metric I love to give is that, 3 years ago, my colleague Paul Demery and I, we counted 75 vertical market B2B marketplaces. This year, when we go to kind of measure how many there are, I could easily do 250. There's more like 400. So is that a lot of activity? Yes, you bet. Are we talking major companies with major valuations and where they intend to go? Yes, you bet. Now, will all that come out in the wash? No. This is the wild, wild west. There's a lot of stuff being tried. There's a lot of stuff that's going to fail. But in the meantime, what we're seeing here is that for the first time in the B2B marketplace trend, the growth curve is that buyers and sellers now have much more options to look at because this is now mainstream digital commerce and will remain so for the foreseeable future. It's right there with anything else. So more business, not less, is going to morph to a marketplace strategy that's going to incorporate maybe one, but in reality, probably several, depending upon what your line of industry is. So a few more slides here.
And Mark, if I could, real quick,
Yeah.
a great question just came in the chat, and the question is, do you have a sense how much of this growth is pure just marketplace versus switching channels, right, to commerce and marketplaces from other channels? Do you have any insight there or any guidance?
Well, it's hard to answer that, because here's why. Because the cannibalization factor is that does take place, but keep in mind here, the last 2 years have skewed where transactions are emanating from. So did marketplace or the marketplace growth, cannibalize an existing channel? Probably the answer is no, because that channel wasn't around for 18 months. It was offline. So all those transactions are now going through a new pipeline, and that's called B2B marketplaces. And it's awfully hard to generalize because marketplaces differ so much by vertical market. I mean, the only thing they have in common is the name marketplace. So for healthcare, I spent a lot of years in healthcare. Healthcare was basically a kind of a cloistered market. The enterprise healthcare folks, they kind of had the same supply chain partnership for a lot of years, and a lot of mid-sized companies couldn't crack that. But guess what? When the pandemic hit and these guys couldn't source PPE or ventilators, they began turning to a whole new generation of healthcare marketplaces that now are becoming, primetime suppliers to these enterprise systems. And is that cannibalizing sales? No, that's a brand new sales channel they didn't realize 2 years ago. So my final couple of slides here kind of set the context here. So did it change? The answer is yes. And finally, will this change be permanent? The answer is double yes. So my takeaway here is that marketplaces come in all shapes and sizes. And can you find your place in the sun? Yes, you can. But, this is not with anything having to do with, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a new channel for many people. They don't know what to do. So a lot of companies are afraid of Amazon. They're worried that if they don't confront it, it'll take over their business. So I go to a lot of trade shows. I talk to a lot of distributors, and to your face, they'll say things like, well, nobody sells our niche like us because we've been around 125 years and nobody has the product we do. And then you buy these guys a beer and they tell you, yeah, they are deathly afraid of Amazon. But my point is, will you find your place in the sun no matter whether you're big, small, or otherwise? The answer is yes. But the challenges are A, your data has to be correct. B, you have to know exactly the product mix that's right for you to sell in the marketplace, and then begin to get trial and error. And then number 3, you've got to think through the entire acquisition strategy for the marketplace. It's not just technology. This is not a technology question. The technology is ubiquitous here. It is a sourcing, a customer service, a supply chain issue. So the more holistic that an organization is when thinking through what those marketplace challenges are, the faster you're going to find your place in the sun. You're going to find a marketplace or the marketplace strategy that's just right for you. So that's my final takeaway for my slides here.
Wonderful. I think I shortchanged you on your last slide. If there's any other comment you want to make here, please.
No. I put this one only to show you that, yeah, I mean, by some counts, like Bank of America and a few other analysts, inside 2 years, Amazon will be the biggest industrial supplier, far surpassing Grainger and MSC, those traditional channels, if you will. But keep in mind, a rising tide lifts all boats. So yeah, these guys will be a mile wide and an inch deep. So where do other marketplaces stack up against these? You do what you do best. Your product, your customer service better than anybody else. That is how you're going to grow your marketplace if you're a marketplace operator, or if you are indeed buying and selling within the vertical. You look for the ones that best fit your needs, and you're all going to be just fine. Sit back, enjoy the growth, do the hard work, and you got a whole new channel to kind of play with here. A lot of fun coming up.
Great, thank you. So Mark, I have one final question.
Yeah.
Whether we were to overlay the Gartner hype cycle, or we looked at Jeffrey Moore's technology adoption and crossing the chasm, from my perspective, we're seeing unprecedented activity and demand for building marketplaces, particularly in B2B. I wonder, one, do you see that too, that we're still in the early days of this, the early innings? And two, is it all rosy? How are they going? Do you have any research or even anecdotal evidence that perhaps, maybe there are challenges? And if so, what does that point at?
Well, the thing is, to kind of boil it down to this, I think that the stat I just quoted a few minutes ago was that, 2 years ago, and we count these guys, we know who these guys are, 75 we had, some of the marketplaces go back 2 decades in healthcare and EDI. So, this stuff has been around for a while, but now this year, I'll probably rank at least 250 and probably more like 400, but in 2 years, will all 400 be around? The answer is no. So my point is, yes, this is indeed the new frontier, the wild, wild west. A lot of stuff being thrown against the wall to see what sticks. So that is what e-commerce does. But then, like any market, as it matures, it settles in, and you have winners and losers, because the buyers and the sellers are going to find out which ones best serve their needs. And that's how any market in e-commerce comes into roost. Those who service the needs of the buyer and the seller, they're going to make it. Those who don't, they won't be around in a couple of years. So my point is, do the homework, do the legwork, check out what's right for you, go talk to a lot of people, benchmark the competition, do some best practice stuff, and you're going to find your way through the wild, wild west. Join the wagon train, and you'll get through all the bad stuff here.
Fantastic. Very insightful. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. So with that as the context, let's turn to a guy that's in the trenches and is actually operating a marketplace. And that is our friend, Tyler Ellison from ChemDirect. Tyler, would love to hear initially, if you could just tell us a little bit about what was going through your mind when you decided to embark on your marketplace journey, and a little bit about how it's going, how's it been, and maybe even some of the ups and downs. If we could just start with that, would be great.
Surely, and as Mark indicated, it is the Wild West, but we're enjoying our little wagon trip so far. The ChemDirect story really starts as my role of CEO of a chemical company, and living as the CEO, as a manufacturer, and being in the chemical value chain on a daily basis, brought forth a number of issues that I was confident could be solved with the marketplace. So from a supplier standpoint, you're relegated to go through very opaque traditional distribution channels. And the issues that creates is the manufacturer does not have end market access. So they lack any customer insights, any customer information, any companion products that may be beneficial to the customer. So they're really flying blind. The other issue, really a lack of data and forecasting. So once it leaves your facility, you have no ability to understand the bidirectional data that would indicate what demand signals are going to be. And again, we think that's solvable, or is solvable, with the marketplace approach. At the end of the day, because of the inefficient value chain, the manufacturers are saddled with operating inefficiencies and inventory. So that's on the supplier side. On the buyer side, customers really cannot compare and discover in a neutral environment. And more people want to use the internet to be able to discover, shop, and compare of products of all types. Pricing is opaque, so it's a torturous process for a customer to get prices. Nobody wants to send emails and wait a week to get a price. And last, and certainly not least, the lead time. So you're talking 16 to 20 weeks with all the touches and inventory passes. So, fundamentally, our belief was and is that, customers are going to demand a B2C experience in a B2B environment. So those habits aren't getting checked at the workplace door. And we see that every single day at ChemDirect.
Awesome. So that's a great setup for a question that really dives right into our topic today. How did you approach creating a performance management environment for you? And specifically, let's start with, how did you go about defining and determining what would be the right metrics for you to be measuring in the first place?
Yeah, if you want to flip to the next slide, I'll go over real quickly just the performance management flywheel. So it's really fulfillment, optimization, supplier growth and health, buyer growth and retention, marketplace health, and UX. And so we constantly spin around that for performance management. In our experience in setting metrics, I think early on, you really have to try to predict what you're going to need longer term. So say like 3 years from now. Otherwise, you can fall in the habit of shooting yourself in the foot by looking too closely at what your immediate needs are. For example, you focus on driving first purchases, then you end up being too reliant on first purchase discounts. So again, extending your headlights out early when you're starting a marketplace. The next thing is have a mix of business vital metrics that you can always track. Customer acquisition costs, revenue, net promoter score, as well as metrics that support quarter-long or half-year sprints and initiatives. Thirdly, and all data doesn't have to be quantitative, right? And I think this is often missed. Capturing customer feedback in a structured way can sometimes be the most valuable data that you collect, even though you may not turn it into numbers.
Excellent. Yeah, sentiment analysis has become a domain of its own in the software world, and all types of solutions out there to help with that. So specifically to the topic of buyers and sellers, anything you could enlighten us with in terms of metrics and buyers and sellers in particular?
Yeah, so we started by being really quite exhaustive in tracking and mapping everything you possibly can. From there, you set a strategy and related metrics in a variety of ways. One is identify points of strength and double down. One of our points of strength is that everything that you see has price shown and inventory, live inventory. Identify weak points and prioritize them to get more specific metrics back on track. And a lot of that for us, it was the initial user journeys. Third is chart a strategic course that might be different from what the data is saying, which is fine. I mean, data informed is the goal, but not necessarily data driven. The other thing is segmentation is critical. And that's one of the things that we learned is all buyers are not created equally and their value props aren't created equally. So huge enterprise buyers are going to have different goals compared to the SMB tail buyer. So even if you build only one dashboard, if you build one dashboard to show all users, be intentional about what metrics you pay attention to relative to your segmentation. Next is really product focused internal metrics. How many times did users log in? How much traffic did my storefront get? And the other caution is don't ignore supply chain and fulfillment metrics. And one of the things that we see is, 50% of the value of a marketplace is to shop, and 50% is to ship. And you cannot neglect fulfillment and visibility metrics.
Excellent. So data is center field to all of this. Integrated data from various sources, which sometimes can be a challenge. And then there's the representation of that data using technology. What was that like? How do you do that, presumably with dashboards as such?
Yeah, we're evolving, and McFadyen's been actually a great help with this. And we like aspirationally, we want to build a grid view where you can view reports with multiple time horizons at once, week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter, and have the flexibility depending on what the user values. And so we really like that a flexible grid view.
So you provided a dashboard, obviously anonymized with no data, but is this representative of the approach you're taking?
Yes, very much so. And the ability to drill into each of those is critical as well.
Good. Anything you could share about how you're determining what are the priorities and what's the actionable data and how you act on that?
Yeah, I would say one is we always really start with intentionality and always start with a question. Don't just blindly build reports and throw data around for the sake of it. The other one is access, to make sure that people need, and want to jump into the data and can do so whenever they want. Next is really simplicity. And if people need a translator to understand the data, they're less likely to use it. So use plain English, and be aware of acronyms. And then last is really the decision-making process. And so data is useless if you don't weave it into your decision-making process, Lee. And so we should be able to always answer when we look at the data, so what? What is this telling us? What business decisions do we have to make because of this data?
And I talked about the process dimension to marketplace performance management. Anything else you could add around how you're operationalizing this at this point? I know you're still early in, but what does that look like?
Yeah, we personally kind of gravitate towards the OKR approach and really define the 3 to 5 top organizational OKRs and have them cascade throughout the organization, and then obviously have our dashboards support that at a detailed level. So that's really how we try to bring it to life, Lee.
Great. So the $64,000 question: what would it be like managing your marketplace without this type of information and this type of representation of the data so you can act on it?
Yeah, it'd be wandering around in the wilderness.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that. Great. Mark, do you have any thing you'd like to add to what Tyler shared, or any questions?
No, but I mean, you can't emphasize that all of this begins with data. And so your marketplace is only as good as your data to the marketplace. So a lot of companies are still fundamentally struggling. And one of the things that they might not be ready for on the marketplace front is that if they don't have their ERP system linked to the e-commerce site doing, that kind of transactional type of data now, then, having the data ready for a marketplace you're going to be surprised by a lot of all that. So many is the program that we've talked to anecdotally, where a lot of people put in play a brand new front end system, ready to link to all kinds of things, including marketplaces. And guess what? They found that their data was a mess, and they wound up having to invest millions more to clean up the ERP or the hodgepodge of ERPs to get ready for the front end they've already installed, thought they're going to have ready to go. So, clean data, it all begins with that, including for the marketplace.
Indeed. Wonderful. So this is one representation or one use case for how an MPM strategy could be used. This is a B2B chemicals company. But there's other ways. Businesses are different, obviously, and not everybody wants or needs the exact same type of solution. So I've asked Laura to help us understand a couple of other areas, key performance areas that operators should be managing and how they might use data. So Laura, if I can ask you to jump in here, and maybe you can take us through a little bit of information.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get started with our seller performance dashboard. This dashboard is really important to you as a marketplace operator to help gauge how all of your sellers are performing. It's important to understand when they're performing well and when they're not. So you can look at various metrics to help them see what could be the root cause of that. We've identified some top KPIs that really give you an insight into that. You can see them on the screen. They include seller GMV. This metric shows the per month gross merchandise value driven by a particular seller, revenue, order totals, and average order value as well. Looking at this dashboard, we can see this particular seller, for example, had a spike in GMV in August and November. So that's something that you would want to, as a marketplace operator, bring to their attention and dive into what potentially caused that. Did they onboard some additional products that created some more demand? And if so, is there anything else we could be doing to add additional products or services to reach your customer? So there's a lot of really valuable information on this dashboard that can allow you to work with your seller to make sure they are, optimizing their performance in your marketplace in general. So the next slide we'll look at is the buyer analysis. Another important question is, how do you evaluate your buyer performance? So this dashboard provides a reliable look into the health of the demand side of things with your business. You can see data such as new versus repeat buyers, buyer by geography, orders over time. So you're really seeing kind of who is coming to your website when. If we look, we can see that there is an increase in guest users for this particular seller in the month of October. So again, this is a metric that's standing out and something that you would want to take a deeper look into why. Perhaps there were some campaigns that were running that were driving traffic from different sources. So it's really designed, all of these dashboards, to kind of give you an overview and then allow you to drill down to see kind of those root causes and how you can use them to bring on more buyers. Okay, we'll quickly take a look at category analysis. So the category analysis is going to give you insights into what categories are performing best and which SKUs may be performing best within those categories. You're going to see things on the dashboard such as transacted SKU count, transacted SKU count by seller, and top GMV by product categories. Obviously, this is going to enable you to make suggestions to different sellers. If you're seeing categories that are performing better where they may not be carrying certain products, you can make those suggestions to them, and vice versa. If things are not performing well, maybe there's things you could do to increase those performances, or maybe they're just not products that are going to be as relevant to your marketplace. Next up, we have GMV patterns. This dashboard helps the marketplace operator identify patterns using a funnel vision through metrics like GMV, number of orders, revenue, and average order value. It really gives you the tools to kind of zone in and focus on these GMV patterns to help you make more informed business decisions. Okay, now we'll take a look at order trends. So order trends provides insights into trends through seasonality of products, categories, GMV, average order value, and number of units sold. This is a really important metric because it helps you forecast demand. Are there certain times of the year that products are selling more than others? And if so, be aware of that so you can maintain an optimized inventory plan. Helps you allow for lead times. So being able to kind of see these trends month over month, year over year, really provides you with valuable information that you can share with your sellers and distributors. Lastly, we'll take a quick look at abandoned cart. So abandoned cart is obviously a really important metric. This user came to your marketplace, added something to their cart, and you weren't able to complete it as a transaction. So in this dashboard, we can see, for example, that in December, there was a large increase in the number of abandoned carts. You're going to want to take a look at that with your seller to determine why, and you can see, is it certain products that are consistently being abandoned or potentially certain categories that are being abandoned? Are there factors such as shipping delays that their users getting to checkout and seeing that and then leaving their cart there? So again, it's really kind of providing you with an overview that allows you to do a deeper dive with your sellers. Okay, so I know we're talking about a lot of information today, so I wanted to make you aware of a resource that we have available for download on our website. It is a top 20 marketplace KPIs that matter that really kind of dive a little deeper into all of these. And we encourage you to go download it and feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. Okay, since we have an expert on chemicals distribution with us, let's use oil distribution as an analogy for this slide. You've probably all heard the saying, data is the new oil, in terms of being today's high value asset. Like oil, we start by extracting data from multiple systems. The e-commerce platform provides details like order value, conversion rates, buyer rates, etc. The marketplace platform provides details like seller acceptance rate, returns, etc. Web analytics provides details like web traffic, SEO, time on site, and payment. We also have payment and tax, which goes over KYC, chargebacks, fraud, etc. We work with oil. We kind of, I don't know, Lee, if you want to speak to this a little bit more, but kind of fine tuning the marketplace performance that oil does for, you know, a acquire system or anything like that. But it's important to look at the extraction and usage for these marketplace performances.
Great. Very good. I appreciate that, Laura. So with all of this information, the question that probably might be going through your mind is, great, how do you get started? And the short answer to that, frankly, is, well, it depends where you're at in your own journey. And this diagram is intended to depict that journey. Again, as I mentioned, we see it as really 4 steps: planning, which is building that strategy for your marketplace. And a critical output of that needs to be your success criteria, KPIs. So if you're just beginning to embark on a marketplace initiative and you're just beginning to undertake the strategy phase, please be mindful that this is exactly the right place to start and put your focus right up front. And as Tyler said, with a long-term view, perhaps 3 years out, what are those criteria that you're going to need today, and then moving through the subsequent years. If you've already done that and now you're into the build phase and you're standing up this marketplace, you need to be mindful of what are the data requirements and the dashboards that you're going to want to be using. So this should be integrated into that build phase so that you can provide that once you get to the operate phase. When do you deploy a solution like an MPM dashboard? Well, obviously not before you go live. There's no reason to. You need data. So probably once you start collecting meaningful data and you want to start capturing that, that's the time to be operational with a solution like an MPM dashboard. And then obviously what that's going to give you is your performance results. This 4th area, optimize, is really that ongoing process that we talked about earlier of how do you sustain the actual management of this marketplace with data. So, you know, what we suggest to our clients is that you should create a cadence monthly, certainly in the beginning, and perhaps over time move to quarterly. We actually do provide to our clients advisory services to come in and help them I love this engine. It reminds me of my Harley engine, the big V twin, but determining which levers to pull and change metrics. This is just to symbolize your dashboard, but the levers on the seller side, seller recruiting, curation, commission rate, ad rate, and levers that you have on the buyer side, payment options, UX features, email, your staff, and your SEM spend. These are all some of the levers. And so what we provide to our clients is, even if they have built their own dashboards, is that we can bring our expertise or advisory services practice to sit with our clients to make sense of it, right? This is new and probably the first time. Unlikely it's the second time that you're launching a marketplace. So it's new, and so we like to suggest putting in place that process, inculcate it into your culture, and then if you need outside advisory, at least while you're in the startup phases, to do so. So that really covers our content for today. We're doing pretty good on time, perhaps a little over, but we'll stay as long as you want on Q&A, but we'd love to open up the floor to any questions that you may have, and hopefully we can answer them. So with that, Tom, I'll turn it back to you to coordinate that for us, if you would.
All right, thank you, Lee. So we have had a great set of questions here. Thank you to everyone who has submitted, and please keep them coming. I highly doubt we'll get to all of these, so we will follow up personally. We know usually who asked the question. Some people have chosen to be anonymous, but we will follow up with whoever we are able to if we can't answer your question. So the first one is for Tyler. And Tyler, you were talking about the importance of fulfillment and kind of other service-related metrics on the seller side. And this question says, Tyler, you referenced that your average fulfillment time is only 3.5 days. What is the industry standard that you're benchmarking that against? And what fulfillment metrics do you measure to maintain and improve that delivery time?
Yeah, great question. So the industry standard, 8 to 12 weeks in general. And so, the bar isn't set incredibly high for us to do that. So we look at from the order rate, and we have a bunch of metrics for manufacturer compliance on when do they accept the order. Inventory accuracy plays into that. And then we have certain visibility tools that we're developing to give in-transit visibility, tracking numbers, making sure that we have the tracking numbers correct, and we've got great supply chain partners to do that. And then it's customer satisfaction, so kind of a perfect order rate, and we're at about 99.85. And then again, the tracking goes modal specific. So if it's bulk, it's different than LTL, which is different than small pack.
Excellent, great answer, and thanks for that insight. The second question is, I'm going to direct this to Lee first, but anybody feel free to pile on. We're early in the internal conversation phase of our marketplace build. Where is the right place within that to start thinking about a performance management approach?
Good question. So I'll reference back to the diagram I just shared. If you didn't do it, perhaps it sounds like maybe you didn't do it when you were doing your strategic planning for your marketplace. I would encourage you to get about that immediately, because you've got to define your success criteria and your KPIs in order to move into determining what your data requirements are. So if you're in the build phase, you want to have this integrated and running in parallel with that build phase of your marketplace, so that you're ready when you do go live and start operating your marketplace. So, if let's say perhaps your build phase is 6 months and you're in the first month, maybe, there's certainly time, but I would encourage you to get about that as soon as possible.
Good answer. Thank you, Lee. Let's see, what's the next one here? And this one, I'll ask Mark this one, because I thought this was an interesting just question about B2B marketplaces in general. Are B2B companies purchasing their core purchases on marketplace, or purchasing items that are non-core?
Oh, it's core. I mean, one of the things that and Lee, and Tyler drilled down into this quite a bit, which is that one of the factors driving marketplace growth for sourcing core product is that a lot of marketplaces now have the tools in place where they're becoming ad hoc supply chain management tools, if you will, to do increased visibility into the supply chain. Think back to when all this began with the pandemic and people lost track of anything beyond tier one. So one of the ways that they're sourcing core products in a better way is not just sourcing product via marketplace, but they're using a lot of the features on some of these more advanced marketplaces to source and look at a supply chain type of tool. So it's core. It's not ad hoc, it's core.
Okay, that's great to hear. And on the topic of category expansion, I think this will be probably Lee and Mark, maybe Tyler, but I'll ask it to Lee first. And it's, like I said, category expansion. And this is from a marketplace operator, it sounds like, or at least a commerce operator. Do you think we should look to grow and expand our catalog and hope for more sales, or should we focus on fewer items, watch where and how it grows, learn those product trends inside out, and see where it leads? So basically, this is a question about, should we focus on our core, or is category expansion the right way to go?
So I think the short answer to this, and I would love to get Tyler's view as well, is get that core set of categories and products stabilized, get it working for you before you start deflecting your interest and attention into expanding into other categories. I think that it's always sound judgment that to get some success under your belt, prove the concept. Oftentimes, clients will actually set up a pilot phase to do just that. Let's put some categories out there, some products. Let's see how we do, learn from it, and then take it the next step and expand. Tyler, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd concur with that. What I'd say is relevance is key when you start. And the example I would use is, you'd never go to Expedia more than once if they had 3 airports. So for us, it was, we had a vertical of life science. And so we targeted that category first, get enough liquidity in there to be relevant and drive repeat purchases before you embark on spreading yourself too thin and losing that relevance factor.
Nice. Good answer. So this one actually just came in, and this is also speaks to kind of the supplier side of things, but it's a little more general. But I think Tyler, you have some great insights here. How is your marketplace ensuring product quality by suppliers?
Yeah, so every chemical SKU that we bring on has 200 data points, and we digitize every piece of documentation. And by and large, people buy off of specifications. So if you think about our customer service promise, really starts with how we engineer that whole experience, right? And I think Amazon does a terrific job. I mean, nobody's ever spoken to a live person at Amazon, I don't think. And so we were very cautious on how we curated the data, how accurate we were with the data. We're dealing with chemicals, not tennis shoes. So you have to be 100% right. And our order defect rate, as I mentioned before, is extraordinarily low because we were very methodical on how we ingested and curated all of the products.
Great answer. Thank you. This one is for Laura. This is actually, I believe, specific to the MPM dashboard. Someone asked if it's possible to create cohorts within that data, within those dashboards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we could do. We could work closely with our development team to see what their exact needs are. And yeah, something we could absolutely work with you on.
Yeah, I'll just add that our dashboard, and it's a set of dashboards, over 100 KPIs. I think we've got 10 or 12 dashboards and many reports, is a SaaS-based subscription model product that can be customized for each and every client. And we realize, of course, that's the reality is chances are most people aren't going to take it out of the box, but we do have an out of the box set of dashboards, reports, and KPIs that we support, but it's very extendable. And that's part of our implementation model, to go through a discovery process, determine what your specific requirements are, and then we can build that into the product.
Excellent. And this will be we'll close with this question. This was asked actually by a couple of different people. And it's also one of my favorite ones to ask, even if no one asks it, to be honest with you. And that is every panelist here, what is your advice for somebody starting a new marketplace? Like they're in the planning phase, and we've had, planning phase and ready to launch questions here, but really what it comes down to is what is your overriding piece of advice for somebody that's launching a new marketplace property? And let's start with Tyler and then go to Lee, then Laura, then Mark.
I would say, understand, refine, and validate your value drivers. So whatever constituents you intend to serve with your marketplace, interview them, validate it, understand the friction points that your marketplace is going to solve. And if you have that behind you, you have the confidence to go take that journey into the Wild West. But to me, it starts with that.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I'll draw on the three phases of an initiative because I'm going to say there's two areas to focus on. You've got the plan, you've got the build, and then you've got the operate phase. Honestly, my IT team, our tech team might disagree with me, but I believe that the build phase is the easiest part of a marketplace initiative. The technology is known. We do this every day, day in and day out. There's nothing new there from a technology standpoint for somebody that's been doing it. The magic, in my mind, is in that first phase, in the plan phase, and in the operate phase. So if I could give you two pieces of information or a piece of advice, when you start to embark on an initiative like this, I typically find that there's one person that maybe has gotten a religion about marketplace, but if ultimately they've got to go to some committee, the CEO, the board, perhaps, to get sponsorship and get this funded. And the question they're going to ask is, well, why should we do a marketplace? And so to answer that question, you need to build a business case for why this is a good investment, because as you know, they're going to be looking at a portfolio of possible investments. Why should marketplace rise to the top? In that process, the most important element Tyler just hit on is really nailing that value proposition. Why are people going to come to you and buy, and why are they going to continue to buy? So that's on the front end. On the back end, which is often ignored, is being sure that you know exactly what it's going to take to scale that business. So again, back to build it and they will come. That's a losing strategy. So marketplaces do require continued investment and nurturing. Make sure you understand what that looks like and you plan for it, because that can become the Achilles heel. You could do everything right up to that point, but if you're not going to continue to nurture this business the way it needs to be nurtured, you ultimately won't meet those objectives that you've set when you put that plan together in the first place.
All right, Laura, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Lee and Tyler said. I think it's really important to look at not just a marketplace implementation, but it really is a journey. And I think they, clearly touched on all of those aspects.
All right, thank you. And Mark, anything to pile on?
No, I think that my colleagues on the panel here covered it pretty good.
Excellent. All right, well, Lee, I'll turn it back to you to close us out and bring us home.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to all of you who joined us. Hopefully this was a useful expenditure of your time and you got something out of it. And if you have any questions, again, you've got my contact information, reach out. But thank you again, and special thank you to Tyler and Mark for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. It was invaluable for today, and appreciate you joining us. So with that, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.